Imagine a peaceful college town. You know, the kind of place where nothing really bad ever happens. And then suddenly, it's shattered by a brutal crime.
It sounds like the plot of a true crime show.
It does, doesn't it? But unfortunately, this one is all too real. We're talking about the Idaho 4 murders. And today, we're going to take a deep dive into how this case became a cautionary tale about true crime in the digital age.
The digital age really adds another layer of complexity to these cases.
It does. We're using Paramount's Docuseries, Cyber Sleuths,
Huh.
the Idaho murders,
Yeah.
as our starting point. But we're going to go deeper. We're also weaving in insights from a podcast episode by Annie, a true crime content creator. She dissects the docuseries and kind of offers her own take on things.
So we're getting a double dose of analysis.
Exactly. And for all you true crime fans out there, you've probably seen all the discussions and theories about the Idaho 4 murders online. We're going to unpack all of that and talk about why it's so important to, approach online information, especially in cases like this, with a critical eye.
It's easy to get swept up in the speculation.
It really is. So to set the scene, it's November 2022 in Moscow, Idaho. 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Champion, are found murdered in their off-campus house. And the crime is incredibly violent, and at first there are no obvious suspects. So, as you can imagine, the media goes into a frenzy.
I remember when the story first broke, it was everywhere.
It was inescapable, and social media just amplified everything tenfold. The case goes viral, you've got traditional media outlets, independent content creators, everyone's trying to get the scoop. And then you have the rise of what the docuseries calls the cyber sleuths. These are just everyday people who decide they're going to investigate the case online.
So they're like armchair detectives.
Exactly. And while some of them might have good intentions, they generate so much information, speculation, and sometimes outright misinformation that it creates a whole new set of problems for law enforcement.
It must be like trying to sift through a mountain of noise to find the actual signal.
That's a great way to put it. And the docuseries highlights how investigators had to use valuable time and resources to debunk false information and manage public expectations, time that could have been spent working on the actual investigation.
It's almost like the public's desire for instant answers can sometimes hinder the process.
And a perfect example of that is the story of WSU Kim. This woman pops up online claiming she has insider information about the case.
WSU Kim, wasn't she the one who claimed to have seen the killer?
That's her. And her story just spreads like wildfire. It's a prime example of how quickly unverified information can gain traction in the digital age. And what's so interesting about her story is that it blurs the line between credible tips and baseless rumors. It makes you think, how can we tell the difference in a world where anyone can claim to have information?
It's a tough question, and it gets even more complicated when you consider the ethical side of things.
Oh, absolutely. The docuseries also touches on the phenomenon of what they call crime tourism. People were actually traveling to the crime scene in Moscow just to create content for their social media channels.
Wow, that's disturbing. It's like they're treating a real-life tragedy like a tourist attraction.
And it is pretty disturbing. And it raises some uncomfortable questions about our obsession with true crime. Are we becoming desensitized to the real human cost of these events? Are we turning suffering into entertainment?
It's something we need to think about. And then there's the whole issue of profiting from misinformation. The docuseries looks at how some content creators might prioritize getting views and engagement over, actually being accurate. I remember Jeremy, the neighbor who was wrongly accused online because of an interview he did.
Oh, yeah, he was just trying to be helpful, and then the internet decided he was acting suspiciously.
And he ended up receiving death threats, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And it shows how quickly things can spiral out of control online, how accusations can have real-world consequences for innocent people.
It's a stark reminder that words have power, especially online.
And then you have the judge's decision to implement a gag order in the case. This was meant to prevent the spread of misinformation and protect the integrity of the investigation. But it sparked a lot of debate.
It's a tough situation, isn't it? On one hand, you want to ensure a fair trial, but on the other hand, you have the public's right to information.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And right in the middle of all of this, you have the story of Jeff, the informant. He claimed his friend was involved in the murders.
Oh yeah, Jeff. He had that whole story about a bloody knife and clothing.
Yeah, initially it seemed pretty compelling, but then his credibility came into question.
It just shows how easy it is to get caught up in a story, especially when it seems to provide answers.
And in the midst of all this chaos and speculation, Kaylee Goncalves' father, Steve, steps forward in the docuseries with a really powerful message. He criticizes the way the case is being covered, especially online, and he pleads for more responsible reporting.
It's a poignant reminder that these are real people, not just characters in a true crime story.
Absolutely. His perspective is so important. So after hearing all of this, we're left with a big question. Can social media actually be a force for good in true crime cases? Or does the potential for harm outweigh any benefits?
That's a question we'll explore in more depth next time. We'll continue our deep dive into the Idaho 4 murders and really try to unpack the complex role social media played.
So we just spent some time focusing on, the more troubling aspects of social media's involvement in the Idaho 4 case, but is there a flip side? Could it actually be a force for good in cases like this?
It's a valid question. The podcast host we've been following, Annie, she makes a point about the online true crime communities. They're not all bad.
Yeah, there must be some positive impact, right? I mean, we've all seen how social media can be used to spread awareness and even generate leads in some cases. Remember the Gabby Petito case? That family with their YouTube channel. They actually had footage of her van.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. That footage was a huge break in the case. It really shows how quickly information can spread online. And in these situations, that speed can be incredibly valuable.
Exactly. And think about it. Missing person cases, cold cases, they can all get amplified on social media. You can keep them in the public eye and sometimes even directly help solve crimes.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What if social media had been around during some of those, really famous unsolved cases?
It's a fascinating thought. It's such a modern phenomenon, this whole idea of anyone being able to become an armchair detective.
Right. We have so much access to information now. But that also means, I guess, we have a responsibility to be careful about what we believe and what we share.
Absolutely. Annie talks about this in her podcast. She distinguishes between people who are genuinely trying to help and those who are just, chasing clicks and notoriety. She even admits to making some mistakes early on in her podcasting career, but she says she learned from them and tries to be more responsible now.
It's a good reminder for all of us, I think.
Yeah, we all have a role to play in shaping the narrative. But where do we draw the line? Is there such a thing as ethical boundaries in the true crime world? Especially for content creators, how do you balance reporting on a case with, potentially exploiting a tragedy for personal gain?
It's complicated, isn't it? There are no easy answers. But just being aware of the potential for harm and being critical of the content we consume, that's got to be a good starting point.
Yeah. It's like anything else online, right?
Mm.
You have to be a savvy consumer and think critically about where information is coming from. Trending doesn't always equal truth.
Annie is a big proponent of focusing on facts and remembering that, behind every case, there are real people whose lives have been impacted. These aren't just characters in a story.
And that's something that Steve Goncalves, Kaylee's father, talks about too. He calls for more sensitivity and respect from everyone involved in covering the case.
That's a powerful message. It's easy to get lost in the theories and the drama of it all, but we have to remember the human cost of these events. Real families are dealing with incredible pain.
So where does all of this leave us? What's the big takeaway from exploring the Idaho 4 case and the role of social media? How do we move forward?
It all boils down to one key question. How can we, as true crime enthusiasts, engage responsibly and thoughtfully with these cases in this digital age? How can we make sure our interest isn't contributing to more harm? And that's the question we're going to tackle in our final segment.
So we've really gone deep, haven't we? Looking at the Idaho 4 case and how social media kind of changed things. But what does it all mean for us? The true crime fans. How do we navigate this world of instant information and all these, armchair detectives and still be, responsible about it?
It's a tricky thing to balance, for sure. Annie, the podcast host we've been talking about, she gives some good advice. She says the first thing is you got to be really careful about your sources.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Like with anything else online,
Right.
You can't just believe everything you read. You got to look at where it's coming from. Are you reading a reputable news site, official statements from the police, or is it just some random person on social media?
Exactly. You got to be your own fact checker these days. Do your own research. Cross-reference things. Look for real evidence, not just opinions.
And I know it's tempting, especially in a case like this one. But we got to be skeptical of anyone who says they're an expert or an insider, especially if they're making money off it.
Right.
What's their agenda? Do they really care about justice, or are they just after clicks and subscribers?
Those are the questions we should be asking. And don't forget what happened to Jeremy, the neighbor who got wrongly accused.
It's a scary example of how online accusations can really hurt people. Even if you don't name someone directly, spreading rumors and stuff. It just messes things up and distracts from the real investigation.
Yeah, Annie's big on focusing on the facts, not the drama. She says stick to what's been verified and don't share things unless you know they're true from a good source.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And if you're going to talk about the case online, do it respectfully.
Mm.
Remember, there are real people involved, not just a story.
That's so key. And out of everything we've discussed, I think Steve Goncalves' message is one of the most powerful. Kaylee's father, his plea for sensitivity and respect from everyone. That's something we should all remember.
Totally agree. And I think that's a good note to end on. We as true crime fans, we got to be thoughtful and critical, hold content creators accountable, check our facts, and approach these cases with sensitivity and respect for everyone involved.
Yeah. If we can manage that, then our interest in true crime won't do any harm. And that's definitely something to aim for.
So that wraps up our deep dive into the Idaho 4 murders and this whole idea of true crime in the digital age. It's a lot to think about, right? Let us know what you think. Head over to our social media and share your thoughts. And remember, stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged, but do it responsibly.